All right. Welcome, everybody. I've got 1 o'clock. Looks like we can go ahead and get started. The recording has just now started as well. So first of all, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, to this afternoon's ESSEC Academy breakout presentation. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to join our session today. We're really excited to present to you all an Identification 101 of McKinney-Vento and migratory students. So before we get started, we just want to remind everyone of a few housekeeping items. So as you've all seen these before, but just as a reminder, to reduce distractions during the presentation, we ask that you mute your computer or your phones while we're presenting. Turn your camera function off, if you will, to help mitigate any issues with the bandwidth that we might have and issues we might have there. So make sure to turn your camera off, please, and then type any questions in the chat box too. There are three other colleagues of mine that are presenting this afternoon, and we'll all work in the chat box and try to get your questions answered. If we don't have an answer for you, we'll definitely make a note of it and follow up at a later time. And I mentioned this previously, but this will be recorded. The recording of the slides will be provided to you all at a later date, okay? So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. So who are you talking to? Who are your presenters today, rather?
Good afternoon. I'm Burley Wright, McKinney-Vento Program Manager. Nice to see everybody.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Mirabal Pace, and I'm the State Coordinator for Homeless Education.
Hey everyone, I'm Victor Pacheco. I'm the Program Specialist for the South Carolina Migrant Education Program, or the MEP.
All right, and I'm Zach Taylor. I'm a team lead in the Office of Federal and State Accountability of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Access team. So let's talk a little more about that Diversity, Inclusion, and Access team. So we're one of 4 teams in the Office of Federal and State Accountability here at the South Carolina Department of Education. We're really fortunate to have the leadership of our director, Dr. Sarah Longshore, at the helm. And the Diversity, Inclusion, and Access team, we house program offices for Title III Part A, multilingual learners and immigrants, Title I Part C, migrant education, and the McKinney-Vento homeless education program. So particularly the latter two, which we'll be talking about today. And our mission is to ensure equitable identification and access to educational opportunities and services for children and youth who are multilingual learner, immigrant, migratory, or experiencing homelessness. So to get us started, specifically talking about identification is the catalyst for equitable access to educational opportunities. All right, so identification, what we mean is more than just working in our own programs and being siloed by subgroup titles, roles, and then efforts altogether of identification. Identification is much more effective and comprehensive if processes are developed using an equity lens to understand that our students nor ourselves should be siloed by those roles and titles. A holistic approach to identification in itself is imperative to increasing academic equity for our students. And in DIA, we're talking about migratory and homeless students here today, but we use an equity lens for all of our programs and all of our subgroups of students to take that holistic approach and view, the best we can the student for wraparound supports and services. So, using an equity lens means understanding that students are not only migratory, right, or only homeless, for example. There are a lot of unique factors that overlap and compound those gaps. So it makes it more difficult to identify our students and thus, the access to educational opportunities, right, for our students. So for example, if we're looking at the image in front of us, the same exact student, the single student might be experiencing all of the factors listed in that image there in front of you and have a compounded chilling effect of accessing those educational opportunities unless we have proper identification processes in place to be understanding and holistically viewing all of these unique factors that intersect with each other, right? So, if, for example, if one student had all of these factors, for example, that are in these circumstances in their lives, high mobility, their recent arrival, they're experiencing poverty and homelessness, their language and cultural barriers. Depending on if we weren't holistic about identification, they might not they're qualify or, understand that they're qualified for a variety of federal programs and state programs and initiatives. So again, I just want to point out that everything starts with identification. The road to equity and access truly does start through properly identifying our students with an equity lens. So let's shift towards statute, right? So we talked about, theory and practice. We'll look at the requirements at statute here with Title I-A specifically, and then Title I Part C, and also identification under the McKinney-Vento Act, which Linda will talk to you about as well. But so identification of migratory children, it's specifically authorized in 3 different sections of Title I Part C of the Every Student Succeeds Act. Specifically, we're mandated to identify eligible migratory children. We're also mandated to plan jointly among local and state and federal programs to support that identification, like I said before, that kind of that wraparound process and support. And then, of course, we're mandated to coordinate intra and interstate activities to facilitate identification. So what that means is looking at other organizations, federal programs within our state, but also at the state level, specifically, we are required to collaborate with other states to help facilitate identification across state lines, right? So in Title I Part A, Title I Part A mandates collaboration and activities funded under this part with other federal activities as appropriate, right? So not only is the lever for identification based in the statute in Title I Part C, but Title I Part A also mandates the coordination of activities for all the parts of Title I, which includes Title I Part C, right? And so an example of this is the Title I Part A and Title I Part C collaboration for migratory identification, which is a federal activity, right? So you might be familiar with the Consolidated State Monitoring Tool, and there's a section in there specifically looking at Title I Part A and Title I Part C indicators for the use of a parent employment survey, for example. Some type of identification tool or survey that indicates, what the parent's employment is, which would speak to possible eligibility for migrant education, which would be supporting the identification of migratory students. So there's an example of how Title I Part A and Title I Part C overlap. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Linda now, so she can tell us about identification in the McKinney-Vento Act.
Thank you, Zach. Just like Title I-A and Title I-C, the McKinney-Vento Act directly addresses identification. With McKinney-Vento Act, identification is addressed at both the SEA and the LEA level, and then some of them apply to both the SEA and LEA. So we'll go through all 3. Both SEAs and LEAs are required to review and revise any laws, regulations, practices, or policies that may act as a barrier to the identification or enrollment, attendance, and success in school of homeless children and youth. In addition, the statute requires that both LEAs and SEAs pay special attention to identifying homeless children that are not currently attending school. So this refers to pre-K children in the hopes of getting them enrolled in a federal, state, or local quality pre-K program, and out-of-school youth with the goal of re-enrollment in a K-12 program. At the SEA level, the Act requires us to provide services and activities to improve the identification of pre-K and K-12 homeless children and youth. So in addition, the SEA must implement professional development programs for liaisons and LEA staff to improve their identification, to increase LEA staff awareness of the unique needs of homeless students, and to help build LEA's capacity to respond to those needs. Okay, so let's see, LEAs, when we look at LEAs, the identification requirements begin and start always with designating an appropriate person. That can be the McKinney-Vento liaison. In the Act, it lists 10 specific duties that the McKinney-Vento liaison is responsible for. And to start that off is identification. Is to be led by the LEA, but the identification process is to be accomplished through outreach and coordination with school personnel and outside entities and agencies. So to accomplish this, the liaison must provide the PD and other supports to the LEA personnel. Other identification-related liaison duties listed in the statute is the assurances that public notices of McKinney-Vento rights are disseminated, not just in schools, but in locations frequented by parents, guardians, and unaccompanied youth. In addition, these notices are to be in a manner and form understandable to them. So for example, if you have a large Spanish population, you want to make sure that your posters are also in Spanish, not just English. The Act gives the McKinney-Vento liaison both the authority and the responsibility to identify McKinney-Vento students. Other school staff can make those determinations, but only to the extent that the liaison has designated that authority to them. And although all of this does kind of fall on the liaison, legally, the LEA is responsible for ensuring the identification of McKinney-Vento students.
Thank you, Ms. Linda. I'll quickly go over why does identification matter. So it assists with removing barriers for children and youth within the educational system. That basically goes over like removing those barriers that Zach mentioned earlier, like the removing the language and cultural barriers, making enrollment easier for those highly mobile families or McKinney-Vento families that probably don't have the traditional enrollment documents needed. It ensures access to needed supports and resources for students. It provides identified students with equal and fair opportunities to succeed. And identification is the foundation of funding levers and resource allocation. So identification does increase funding. It increases funding levels and can increase the amount you get. And it also impacts the state and federal funding.
Thanks, Victor. So how do we put this all into some practice at the grassroots level? So we've talked about how the law indicates how identification is essential. And identification is critical, because if we don't know who our students are that are eligible, we can't meet their needs and guarantee their rights under the law. We all want what's best for South Carolina students. It's often hard to ask for help, and we all know that parents and families struggle to often make ends meet. So concrete supports in times of need as a protective factor for children and families. These supports, such as food and shelter and clothing, are essential for a student's academic success. Wraparound services that we can provide with the support at the local level, with the support of community services, is critical to address the complex needs of our McKinney-Vento and migratory students. So when we think about it too, if we remember, early identification can really help prevent youth dropout rate as we move through this process with our students. Right. So as Linda, to reiterate what some of Linda said, excuse me, the LEAs must collaborate with all schools and school personnel within the district and within the local school to determine the eligibility. Connect with local resources and families in the community that may provide them services. And then it also pays special attention to special populations' needs and considerations, and be sure that they are addressed with each eligible student. Again, the LEAs must provide education and support on the McKinney-Vento Act to parents and students and community partners. Linda mentioned posters being placed, brochures, all sorts of items that are available to ensure that students are identified appropriately. Professional development and awareness training is essential and should be provided for all community agencies, the school personnel. Think about all points of contact, for instance, that the student may come in contact with. Transportation services, nutrition services, counselors, social workers, all teachers, nurses, front desk staff, and the list goes on. And I'm sure you can think of more ways how a student may cross paths with someone who may be able to make some identification considerations. And we also want to remember too that community partners are an asset, and that educating them on McKinney-Vento and the law is essential to kind of providing those additional wraparound services. So what procedures are in place? These are just some, going to highlight a few questions here. The first one, what procedures may be in place when a family doesn't have proof of residency at enrollment? Think about that and how that may, and how it may help to remove barriers, and because that's essential and required under the Act, is removing all barriers. So what takes place if a family doesn't have proof of residency at enrollment? Are there certain situations where a liaison may delegate authority to other staff for simple determinations? As we've said before, identification is the responsibility of everyone at the local and district level, but and the liaison ultimately will determine the eligibility. But there may be some situations where some simple determinations are done through other staff members at the school. Another thing too to think about is once a student is deemed eligible, what procedures are in place to ensure that a student is indicated as McKinney-Vento and Power School? So some strategies for identification. I know Zach is going to go into this a little bit further and more in depth down the road, but the housing questionnaire, an enrollment survey for screening, what is used when you are screening a family, being mindful of terminology that you use and when communicating with the family. Avoid using the word homeless. Some things that people say in the field are students who are experiencing homelessness, students living in transition, students and families with high mobility, or just to name a few. Again, another strategy is really building those internal relationships with all school staff. That's essential for all of this to work together. And building external relationships with community partners. Again, who are is there a local shelter in your school district? Where is it? Who works there? Is it a homeless shelter? Is it a domestic violence shelter? Who are all the players in the community? Who runs an after school program outside of the school? And what are other Department of Mental Health, United Way, what other youth serving and family serving organizations are there to support wraparound services for these students?
And I'll quickly talk about the migrant education program aspect. So our identification procedures, ideally we get like the school or community-based referrals. So someone at the school level or something like that would fill out the referral. And then we receive the referral over at our end. And from then our staff is kind of divided into two levels. We have recruiters and we have liaisons. So first, the recruiter would initiate contact, determine eligibility, and if the family or student qualifies, we're the ones that fill out the COE, and then we let our liaisons know, and then they follow up to provide any supplemental services to assist with any needs. So we have liaisons that do like food drops. We can assist people with like doctor's appointments and other things like that. More identification procedures. Eligibility is determined at the state level. So, you know, we determine eligibility by filling out the certificate of eligibility, the COE. Eligible student lists are distributed quarterly to district technology coordinators via ADT. District Title I Part C coordinators are also notified of the quarterly list, and we utilize the DM portal for points of contact. And you can always reach out to us for a list as needed. If you would like the list more frequently, feel free to let us know. And in accordance with state eligible migratory list, districts mark the migrant indicator on the South Carolina Student Information page and Power School to indicate migrant status.
And Victor, if I can, those are all really some new points there to consider. I just wanted to pause here for a second and mention that to you all, that we've been working really hard, since eligibility is determined at the state level. So Victor mentioned the COE, the certificate of eligibility. We have state level staff that are filling that out to determine eligibility of every student, eligible migratory student in South Carolina, right? It's a recent innovation, if you will, or procedure that these lists, we've worked with the Office of Research and Data Analysis, specifically our data specialist, James Cornelius is his name, and you might have heard him mentioned in the morning updates with the Office of Federal State Accountability. But we worked with the Office of Research and Data Analysis to kind of piggyback on submitting these eligible student lists to district technology coordinators via the secure ADT file drop. So that's kind of new. The last one, I believe, the last file drop was about 2 weeks ago. We can do them as needed. We can send them to anybody securely that works in the school district. And it's something that we are hoping to do. We will do quarterly, but we're hoping to increase the proper coding of migratory status in PowerSchool. It gets a little difficult because it is, like I said, that state determination, and then shooting that determination back to you all in the districts to code properly in PowerSchool is kind of been hit or miss with everything of all of us in the past. It's just something we're trying to shore up and work together to make sure we're doing properly on. So please feel free to reach out to us. Some of you may have seen those emails if you have that Title I Part C coordinator hat in our DM portal that we use here to contact specific people and coordinators in districts, or maybe some of your district technology coordinators might have reached out to you recently. Whatever the case is, always reach out to us if you need any assistance with anything. We're here to help, and we need to work together to help identify our migratory and our students experiencing homelessness as well. So just wanted to mention that this is a recent procedure that will hopefully be reaping benefits in the future. So.
And here are some strategies for identifying migrant education students. Communicate with families in a language they can understand. Make sure that you're sending messages, sending letters, or anything like that in a language that families can read. Submit referrals to SCMEP staff. We did create like a little website where you can submit referrals. That's where that link that says know a child who might qualify, click here. So through one of our consortiums, we created this website where you can submit referrals. And really this works anywhere in the nation. If you have like a student that's moving to like Immokalee, Florida, or somewhere in California, and you think they're gonna qualify as migrant, you can feel free to submit that referral, and one of the migrant education staff in those states will receive those referrals also. We did create an enrollment survey, which Zach will mention in a bit. We also created this email address, title1c at ed.sc.gov. You can email that email for any questions, any referrals, or you can also contact one of our staff. We all have cell phones, we all have emails, we all have flexible working hours, as people working with this kind of population. Sometimes we work at 6, 7 in the evening, and you can catch us out in the field visiting families during those times or on the weekends also. And, once we get that student that qualifies, we'll fill out the COE.
So we talked about some of the tools for identification. And I just wanted to mention, again, going back to the equity lens, right? And you see the themes of identification that are intertwined and overlapping each other as we present our slides, to you today. We in our team, Diversity, Inclusion, and Access, or DIA, as we refer to ourselves, we've been working with a group of stakeholders that include migrant education coordinators, McKinney-Vento liaisons, Title III coordinators, but also SysOps coordinators or PowerSchool or data and technology coordinators for that data perspective. Just something exciting to mention, particularly to hopefully this audience, you're familiar with McKinney-Vento homeless and somewhat to some degree maybe migrant, but really bringing all three DIA programs together into one screener, right? And that one screener is called what we hope to call the initial enrollment survey. Again, this is not finalized at this time. It's just an innovation that we're working on, hoping to implement in the upcoming fall. It would take the place of the home language survey, for example. Those same questions are on these enrollment surveys. It's just a consolidated effort to do some screening for various subgroups of students on the same page, right? Whether it's online or on paper. It's really exciting work. I know we've gotten some great feedback from the stakeholders that are involved and helping us with this implementation process. But basically, again, it really goes back to we mustn't be siloed by our roles, by the subgroups of students that we work with specifically. It's really important to have that that wraparound mindset for identification, which, as we've said all along, that it's the catalyst for any type of resource equity, resource allocation, and just academic opportunities and achievement for our specific subgroups of students. So migratory and students experiencing homelessness specifically. So just in a collaborative identification initiative that we're working on, just to put it on your radar. We're happy if you have questions about it or want to get involved or want to provide feedback or anything that might be helpful to us. Please just reach out to me and let me know. But it would specifically be a tool for identification to streamline, make it easier administratively for you all in the field, and make it increase the identification of our students, and so thus creating positive outcomes for them and access to that educational opportunity, like I said. So just some work we're doing. I'd love to know how you feel about it. Just initial reaction, if you don't want to put that in the chat, or what you think of something like this in the future. We'd love your feedback. But again, it's going to that wraparound identification, hopefully having a consolidated tool in place. So we're really excited about that.
And I just quickly want to go over this thinking outside of the box about strategies due to COVID-19. Just a friendly reminder to use all available forms of communication, all the apps. Texting is quick and simple. Many of migrant agricultural working families, they really don't have like the time or the flexibility to pick up that phone call at 10 in the morning or something like that. Home visits, we love home visits. Notes with meals also. Take deliberate steps to ensure racial and ethnic equity in all identification efforts. And place signage at your local food banks, at laundromats, inexpensive hotels, county libraries, or parks and other recreation areas. Depending on what part of the state you're in, you might find MEP flyers over at your local laundromat and other places like that. Also, we do a good job at doing things like that to let people know that our program exists to help them out.
Well, why doesn't anybody who's listening at this point, if you have anything that you're doing that's pretty unique or just something that's been really successful, go ahead and put it in the chat and we can share that out. There's been a lot of really great things that districts are doing. Just like Burley was saying, it's those relationships. When you look at and share those signs of homelessness, your bus drivers are out there and they notice when there's a house that's been evicted. The cafeteria staff can see kids that are starting to hoard food. Teachers notice, if somebody's extra tired. Attendance supervisor, when are those absences going up? So using all of those folks around to try and get that identification through whatever procedures you have. What kind of written procedures do you have to make sure when that happens, what do they do about it? And that they know to come to you or the McKinney-Vento liaison about it. So is anybody typing in the chat regarding that? Any great ideas? You work with your Power School people, those hotels and areas in your region that you know are probably substandard housing, like some really low level trailer parks and things like that. Have the Power School people kind of look up who's living in those places. There may be people living there that you don't have indicated as McKinney-Vento, at motels, at shelters, or have the Power School people see who's been moving throughout the school year, and let you know who those are, and maybe those people may be eligible. They might have moved for a reason related to McKinney-Vento losing housing. Anybody else out there?
Those are really good reminder points, Linda, and about the procedures. I was also wondering about, when we talk about concrete supports, what other wraparound services do you and your district provide for families that maybe we didn't talk about here today? Because there's lots and lots of supports and wraparound services that can be available, and some of them are new and innovative. Would love to hear what might be going on out there.
I know it seemed like we had kind of new things going on when it came to the pandemic. Just even being in a virtual classroom setting, that the teacher may notice something in that background that's looking a little bit different from a normal situation, and can contact the McKinney-Vento liaison. A lot of contacts with any of your local shelters. There should be some sort of regular form or something that they use when they get a new family that's come into the shelter. Do you have any relationships with some of your food banks and areas like that? Have those signs up there.
Okay, well, that's okay. We're happy to stay on and talk a little longer, but we just want to thank you all. If you have any questions about any of the material we talked about today, feel free to reach out to any of us. We're really here to help support you and support our students and families as well, right? And again, just the main thing really is that we are working on some consolidation of identification tools, but also it's still important at any moment to reach out to us with questions about identification. And share best practices and really kind of work together with your other school staff in your district, and to really promote identification of homeless students experiencing homelessness and migratory students. And like I said, we'll email out slides and some additional resources as well at a later date, along with the other materials with the S Academy. So just wanted to say thank you so much for reaching out, and we can go ahead and stop recording at this point.